All right, week 3 college football breakdown here. An SEC battle. It might be a conference matchup, but this spread wouldn't tell you so. We got Georgia going to Columbia to take on the Gamecocks of South Carolina. Georgia on the road is a 24.5-point favorite. Seeing this total actually rise quite a bit. It was hovering right around that 50 range earlier in the week. It's all the way up to 53, 53.5. So I've seen a pretty big line move towards this over. Georgia's an interesting team because they run at a very slow pace, and given the fact that they play, so many blowout games, they're so dominant defensively. I mean, just look at that Oregon game. I mean, I had a best bet on the under in that game. They scored their first 7 possessions, and the under still came through. That being said, I kind of learned my lesson in that game that, all right, this offense might have taken it to another level. Incredibly efficient. And there's really no reason for me to believe that they won't be able to have their way in this game against South Carolina. I mean, South Carolina allowed 44 points last week at Arkansas. And listen, Arkansas is a really efficient offense. I've talked about that all summer, and I talked about that in that preview video. But Georgia is kind of that to the umph degree. I mean, they won the national championship last year. Stetson Bennett looked fantastic in that opener against Oregon. There's this perception around Stetson Bennett that, he's if he played at Missouri, he'd be this average quarterback. That is ridiculous. He was over 10 yards per attempt last year. Quit acting like this guy is some mediocre quarterback, and then go watch the Oregon game. This guy's developed into one of the best quarterbacks in college football. And listen, if you want to keep putting your money against Georgia, then go ahead. But here over the last 2 years, it hasn't worked out too well. So, I mean, Georgia should be able to have their way because South Carolina is still pretty weak along their defensive line. Just 2 sacks in their first 2 games. And it's pretty hard to see them stepping up against an offensive line like Georgia's. They've struggled to stop the run early in the season. They do have a good secondary, but the reality of it is if you can't win up front against this Georgia team, they're probably going to be able to have their way. So that week 1 performance against Oregon was that impressive to where I'm willing to give Georgia's offense the benefit of the doubt against anybody. Now, the narrative coming into the year was all Georgia's defense. They lost, 5, 6 first-round picks from last year's team. They lost Nakobe Dean. They lost all these guys. Well, they looked just as dominant in the opener as they did last year. And the one thing you have to remember is by nature of how much Kirby Smart rotates guys in his front 7, by nature of how many blowout games they play, a lot of the guys who are starting now have a ton of experience from last year's championship team. So I talked about that in the week 1 preview. I think that still carries over. South Carolina actually showed improvement, I thought, in the second half of last week's game. Spencer Rattler is a massive quarterback upgrade from what they had last year. I mean, South Carolina's quarterback situation was dire, and I thought Rattler actually played pretty well last week. He threw for 376 yards in a conference game. It's pretty impressive. Now, the issue for Rattler is he just doesn't have a lot around him. I mean, he got sacked 6 times against Arkansas. South Carolina is not good on their offensive line. They can't run the football, as we've seen here the first 2 weeks. And, they're just not good at wide receiver either. So I think a lot of people were high on South Carolina coming into the year. And I'm not saying I'm not, because I think Shane Beamer's done a good job, but it's still year 2. And he still took over a program that needed to be built over a pretty long period of time. There's a massive talent gap in this game. The more I think about it, I do think I'm going to be on Georgia in some way here. Maybe play them first half. It's minus 14.5, depending on where you look. I don't like what I've seen from the South Carolina defense. And, aside from Rattler, they are totally overmatched on the offensive side of the ball. So heavy lean towards Georgia, minus the 24.5. I've actually already released 4 best bets here for week 3. Gave those out this morning here on Wednesday. Plan to have the rest of my week 3 card out by Thursday. Main place you can follow to see what I'm on officially is Twitter. Follow me there at Fordham Betting. One more thing, guys. Check out proud90.com for all your golf apparel needs. You see this shirt right here. I know you've been staring at it the whole time. They got unique but very comfortable polos as well. They got t-shirts, hoodies, quarter zips. Browse their selection, and if you see anything you like at checkout, use code Fordham. It's going to get you 15% off your order. The rest of the information will be in the description below. Proud90.com, code Fordham. Support me, support Proud90, proud90.com. I'll say one more thing about South Carolina. I think this is a team that will get significantly better throughout the season. I just think that Shane Beamer is still so early in his time in Columbia. They've still got ways to go. Great year last year, winning 7 games, but this team still has too many holes to really be competitive in these kind of games. Maybe if they play Georgia later in the year, they'd have a better shot, but this is a total mismatch in my mind. Heavy lean towards the Bulldogs.